Hello, nerds and nerdettes. Welcome back to the channel, where once again we have a new video for you guys. Today we are going to go over 5 great tips for beginners or people that are new to the hobby. Each one of these tips are going to kind of vary depending on your knowledge base getting into the hobby, how new you are, whatever it may be, but I'm going to touch on a couple things that, one, I definitely wish I knew when jumping into the hobby, and 2, I see a lot of people asking about in Facebook groups or group chats or whatever I may be a part of. So I want to make a dedicated video for those people, for those kind of things, for those that do want to jump into the hobby and are a little intimidated. So we'll obviously start with our first tip, but before, I do want to remind you guys that if you are looking for any books, head on over to Organic Price Books. Use that discount code STAYNERDY for $2 off your order. It'll help out an amazing company at Organic Price Books, but it also helps out the channel, which I am very appreciative of. Every little bit counts, and I really am thankful for that. But without further ado, we can jump into the list, obviously starting with number 5. Number 5 is going to be something I see people asking about all the time, and that is going to be how to fix bad binding on a book. There's no sponsor here, but this is the glue that you're going to want to get your hands on. I probably ordered this 2 years ago. It's still good. Comes with a little cap, everything like that. You can get it on Amazon. I think it was like $7 or something. This is the brand that I see most people kind of pass around, use, reference to people. So get your hands on some glue. Those pesky bindings, when you see the pages lifting off the ribbon and it freaks all of us out, this is the solution to that. I remember coming across it so many times early in my kind of collecting career, I guess, and I would want to sell the book. I wouldn't know what to do until I eventually found a similar video to the one that I'm making right now, referencing this exact glue, used it, and the book wasn't like new. I'm not going to tell you and sell you a lie that this is going to make it perfect, like fresh off the press, but it definitely makes it better, especially if you apply it fairly heavily and let it really sit for, most people say, about a day. I did too, and it definitely helped me a lot. So I definitely recommend getting your hands on this, maybe before even jumping into the hobby. I think binding issues are kind of becoming more and more rare. The more and more omnibuses that are being printed, they're kind of understanding what needs to be done, but definitely doesn't hurt to have. So that's number 5, kind of not a no-brainer, because I do see people ask about it a lot, but a little bit of a simple tip for you guys. But we'll jump to number 4. Which number 4, I'm going to need a little bit of help by one of my books over here. This is Hickman Avengers Volume 1, and that is, if those of you haven't guessed it, to stretch those bindings, those ribbons, those spines. It really, really helps out. I'm really kicking myself for all of the books that I dove into when I first got into the hobby and read without stretching them. It's the equivalent of running a marathon without stretching any of your muscles. It definitely damages the book. Maybe you won't notice it right away, but if you go read it again, maybe again, you're going to start noticing some things, and I know I have. So I'm going to be looking over here for a little bit of a reference, but the way I typically stretch my omnibuses, which you'll probably see other videos very similar to this, is obviously pulling down the front and back cover. Definitely remove the dust jacket for this, because that can definitely get damaged during this process. Some books do need to be stretched more than once, which I'll kind of go over here. So I initially obviously start doing pages on each side. If this is new material, you can close your eyes. You can do it upside down. There's a kind of multitude of ways you can go about it without seeing spoilers. Pretty much everything in my Big 2 collection I've read, so there's not a whole lot of spoilers that I can really come across when stretching my books, but you pretty much want to do about the same amount of pages on either side. and you're going to see that ribbon kind of lift off the spine a little bit. Most omnibuses nowadays, you can probably get away with sometimes just stretching once, but sometimes it does need a little bit more love. I also, when I do have it evenly displaced, I do kind of give it a light press. Obviously not doing any of this with any large amounts of force or anything like that. But if I do have to do another pass, I'll obviously do very similar. And for the second pass, I'll actually drop a fragment of pages on one side and give it a slight push and bend. And then I will, my phone just keeps falling, do the same thing on the other side and just kind of keep doing that process there to just ensure that really that binding, that spine's getting opened. I'm reducing as much gutter loss, gutter curve as I can, really allowing the book to lay flat. 9 times out of 10, I don't really read my books completely flat. I'm usually on the couch or sitting down or something like that where I'm kind of holding it. But if you do like a flat kind of reading surface, this is kind of what you need to do to obtain that. But as you can see, it's extremely flat, and then you do have that ribbon slightly lifting off. It's not a great eye, which is this portion here, but it is better than it was. This has already been stretched when I first received it, so I'm not really doing anything here, but that's kind of how I go about stretching it. And then if it needs a third, fourth time for those really tight books, such as DC omnibuses, I'll do the same process as the second stretching, just over again multiple times. But yeah, so that is my 4th tip. Definitely stretch those books. I know it sounds so silly, and so many of us just dive in out of excitement, but it really does matter. I've seen some crazy amounts of damage from people that just flip into the center of the book and pages just completely pop off the block. So definitely take some time out of your day or out of your reading to kind of do that. For some tighter books, I know I've even stretched them before continuing to read. So just a little tip, but that does wrap up number 4. So we'll head to tip number 3, which tip number 3 is going to be, again, not necessarily a no-brainer, but something that I definitely see people kind of forgetting to do or not necessarily thinking of when jumping into the hobby. And that is finding a good source of release information. 2 from the top of my head that I can think of is Omar from Near Mint Condition. He typically has videos dedicated to monthly releases. Every month he goes over multitudes of omnibuses, hardcovers, trades, you name it. He talks about them. He says price tags, typically, page count, everything like that. So that's definitely a great route to go, especially if you're a little bit of a visual learner when it comes to actually learning those dates or what you need to be looking out for. I also do a video very similar to that, but usually it's more of a top 10 style where it's just something that I think my viewers or whoever may be watching should be watching out for either good reading material or maybe it won't be reprinted or something like that. Another good kind of source to get it from is also newsletters. I know Organic Price Books has a great newsletter kind of service that tells you things that are being solicited, released, everything like that. So that's also another route to go if you kind of want more of like a spreadsheet style of releases or things to look out for. But learning those dates, those books that you really want to kind of get into the collection, and you can kind of plan strategically your finances and money from there pertaining to your purchases, I think it is probably the most slept on tip that so many people do jumping into the hobby. And that's how you get into issues of obviously overspending, blowing your budget out of the water. Then you have to purge your whole collection, aspects like that. So kind of being knowledgeable about those release dates, those release times, what's coming out is definitely extremely beneficial. But that is tip number 3. So we'll jump to the second tip, which may be a little bit of a hot take or slightly divisive. But let me know down below if you agree or disagree with this statement. But that is to unseal your books. I know there's a large portion of the community that keeps their books sealed, And sometimes that's typically because of resale value, or you just want to keep it crisp and clean. But for me, I like to unseal my books, and a lot of people that have ran into some issues like to unseal their books, because sometimes when you unseal it, you find out that there's a defect or an issue with the book, and you can then get it replaced or pursue getting it replaced. If a book is sealed, then a misprint, damage to pages, whatever it may be, could definitely be a huge issue you're going to run into if you're not aware of it because you haven't opened your books and actually kind of checked out the book in general. But that also pertains to obviously the type of collector you are. If you are the type of resale collector or just somebody that wants books in your collection in general and you don't necessarily read them, then obviously keeping them sealed might be your best option. But for those of us that do want a fluid kind of reading experience and don't want damage to pages or that 3D misprinting that sometimes you see on books, then definitely pop those babies open, take a look at them, inspect them. It definitely has saved me a couple times, and I know a couple other people that saved, so just keep that in mind when making the decision that you want to make to either unseal or seal based off the collector that you are. Also, a little side tip to this, if you do unseal your books and you still want to keep them in pristine collection or pristine condition, then get yourself a humidifier and a very gentle duster. I personally have a decent humidifier as well as a very soft, almost like a rabbit's tail style of duster for my books. If you do unseal books, obviously they are going to get dusty and they are going to be exposed to humidity, moisture in the air, things like that. So be very aware of those also when it comes to unsealing your books. I live in a very somewhat moisture-filled area, so I need a dehumidifier down in my basement that I typically have plugged in at all times. And then obviously I have my duster that I make passes with, dusting like an old lady. But definitely worth it if you do unseal your books. It pays for itself, keeps those books nice, crisp, and in very good condition, which obviously how much money we spend on these things is definitely important. But that does wrap up number 2. And we're going to finally jump into that final tip for beginners, which is going to be fight the FOMO or set the budget, whatever weird saying that I just made up that you want to use. But pretty much that's just referencing to don't get stuck in the hype behind a book, especially nowadays. I know people jumping into the hobby will hear a bunch of horror stories about books not being reprinted, books being put on the aftermarket for crazy amounts of price or crazy amounts of money and everything like that. Wait it out. Books get reprinted all the time nowadays. You just gotta wait. Be patient. Stick to that budget. Don't jump unless it's some crazy, insane deal. But even then, there's a slight risk because, for example, the Matt Fraction, Ed Brubaker, Iron Fist, or the JMS Thor, if you jumped on a sale on those books, you now have missed out on an expanded edition that's now being reprinted. So definitely be a little patient. Wait on it unless some crazy, insane deal pops up. Then obviously it's your money, do as you wish. But sometimes being patient definitely pays off. So don't fall into that FOMO. Don't fall into that, oh, my budget's not important kind of mindset, because it definitely can get you in not only some trouble financially, but it can also make you miss out on something amazing, such as an expanded edition, like we saw for Iron Fist, and we will soon see for Thor. But that does wrap up all 5 of my tips for beginners. So thank you for watching. I hope this helped out a lot of you guys. I know this title of the video is 5 tips for beginners, but I also see people that have been in the hobby for a while not necessarily knowing some of this information. So it's out there for any of you guys that find it useful. I hope it is useful to you guys. Obviously, if you have any questions at all or any curiosities, comment down below. I obviously always like to interact with you guys, talk to you guys, answer questions, whatever it may be. So feel free to reach out. If I don't get back to you, then obviously a member of the community will. It's such an amazing place, which if you're not a part of, hit that subscribe button to join the Illuminati. You can also hit that bell icon so you can get notified anytime I put out content. I would also very much appreciate you hitting that thumbs up icon. It really helps out the algorithm, and in turn really helps the channel grow. And I'm really trying to get up to that 1K subscriber mark, so I'd be very appreciative of that. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. If you have anything at all to add to my list, leave it down below. And of course, stay nerdy.